I'd like to welcome you all to Deal Aeronautical here in Jinx, America. Actually, that's Oklahoma. But we build the wing skins for the KR2 here. My name is Dan Deal, and I'm working with Ken Cottle, and we're working on Ken's project. This is a KR2 that has been narrowed down and made in, it's not as skinny as a KR1, but it's kind of halfway in between. He calls it a KR1½. Ken is using the KR2 outer wing panel as it's molded the way, in other words, it's our standard wing skin. But in order to get a smaller wingspan, he made his center section wing narrower. And by doing that, he can skinny up the center section, and the total span will be just that of a little bit more than a KR1. Okay? Ken has got about, what is this, about 12 inches?
It's about 12 inches.
Outside the fuselage, and the fuselage of the spar here is 27 inches wide.
27 inches.
24
inches.
24 inches wide right here at the main spar. So he's got his little block set on there. Remember, these are 3.5 inches tall, just like the plans and the wing skin information sheet called for. Now these are 3.5 inches tall. Stand them on top of the center section spar, and if you'll run a tight string across the top of these two blocks, straight out to the tip, it'll touch the main spar right at that point. That sets your dihedral. Now you don't have to worry about washout or anything like that at this point. All you're trying to do is get the dihedral on both wings the same. Obviously, if you use the same two blocks, you're going to have the same washout. You don't have to worry about the airplane being level or anything like that. It doesn't matter because it's all referenced, all off of the center section. The next step was to take this 32-inch rib, and it has a line on it that is marked out here on the tip. In fact, does this show up in here? There's a little line right down here. Okay, now when we send these rib patterns out to you, they'll already have that line on there, and that's actually a 3-degree washout line. So if you'll notice the airplane, the tail is real high. Okay, what we've done, we've taken a level, we just put a tape on there to give us a little bit more, make a longer level out of it. And we've leveled the chord line in the center section of the wing. So we had the level down inside the wing here. Okay, now, if you're thinking that the tail looks high, well, it actually is. Remember, you've got 3.5 degrees of incidence built into the center section wing. So in order for that chord line to be level, the top longeron actually is going to be nose low. Okay? We don't really care about what the fuselage is doing at this point. All we're interested in is making sure that our chord line at the root is level. Okay? So now we've got the airplane blocked up where it needs to be to do that. And we can come out here with this rib from the nose, or the leading edge of the rib right here, to the center of the spar is 8 inches. Okay? Now just put your level. Well, these nails are in the way right now, but they weren't earlier. Put your level on that line, and you can adjust this rib to where that line is level. Okay, then go ahead and put you a couple more nails in there. We actually went ahead and put a little cotton flux with our resin, vinyl ester resin. Put it in there and put these nails in there to hold it. We just wrap tape around the end here to hold it up tight. Okay, now that sets your washout. The next step is to come here then and get the rear spar. Are you able to get that in this picture? You see where I'm touching here? Okay, get the rear spar, and I forget this dimension. Ken, what was it?
It was 22 from the tip to the center of this one.
22
22
1/4 from the nose rib to the center of the rear spar. That's 22 1/4 inches. Okay, so you hold the rear spar right at that point, and align it up and down so that obviously it's got to fit inside the rib. Okay, put a little nail in it to hold the tip here. Come back here to the center section, and he already had his fittings hanging all out here. So all he had to do was put a C-clamp on here and drill these attach bolts. Okay, now the rear spar is set and your washout is all set already. Now, if you got a large enough garage, or if you do this out in your front yard, you can go ahead and do both sides at the same time. That way you make sure that both wings are set exactly right. In fact, you don't even have to do the whole wing. All you have to do is put the main spar on and put the tip rib on. Go ahead and glue it on both tips. But if you don't move the fuselage or raise or lower the tail at all, and you glue both tip ribs on so that the level line is level, then the two wings have to be straight with each other. In other words, you're not going to get an airplane that's going to try to slowly roll off on you. Okay? Okay, something I want to point out right here. We're fixing to start fitting the bottom wing skin. You notice the airplane is in the upright position. You never have to turn the airplane over when you're building the wing with these wing skins. Okay, one thing I want to show real carefully, see these little holes right in here. Each one of the little bays in the spar, in the main spar here we're talking about, has been drilled with a little hole. Now that's a vent hole. Any time you have plywood on both sides of a box spar, you've got to somehow allow for air pressure to go in and out of there. If you don't, if you seal all that up tight, you go up to altitude where the air's thin, you're going to explode your spar because you've got that pressure in there. Okay? So if you've forgotten to do that in your center section main spar or your center section rear spar or your outer spar, you can go ahead and drill it through each one of the, and through the plywood web. That's just about an 1/8-inch hole. Now, if you've not yet sealed everything up, you can drill between each of the vertical webs, like an 1/8-inch hole or so. But make sure it bleeds out either at the tip or at the inboard end so that the air can pass through those. Okay? Now, we've got the rear spar all drilled and glued in place. We've got the main spar in. We've got the tip rib on. We're ready to start fitting. Oh, one other hole I'll mention. See the big hole in the tip of the spar? A lot of you are trying to figure out how to put wing tie downs in. Now, some of you will, if you got your airplane all built, you'll see guys tying them down to the main gear. Really, that's all right, except that the main gear is in fairly close to the fuselage. And if a big wind comes up, it's going to be trying to pick up on a wingtip. So actually, it's better to have a wing tie down out near the tip. Now, Ken has cut this hole in here so that he can put like a eye bolt, or a lot of the guys will use a it's a bow eye that's made for a boat. It goes in the front of a boat, so you can tie a rope on it to pull it up on the trailer. Okay, you can drill that. It's like a 3/8 hole up from below. After the wing skin's applied, put your bow eye or your tie down hook up from there, and then you can put a large washer in here with a nut on it. And this gets you access. Now, be sure that you put that only out near the tip here. Don't come back in the middle of your spar and put that, because you don't want to put a hole in the web way back here. Okay, keep it out right near the tip. Okay, we're ready to start fitting up the bottom wing skin. There's no real trick to this, except there's several points you want to look for. If you already have your center section done, then you've got to make your wing fit the center section. Okay, so as we hold it up, we want the bottom to fit flush. As we come around the leading edge, this is going to be, it's got to all line up. Across the bottom, it fits just perfect. Obviously, your spar should be in the part of the wing skin where there's no foam. Then out near the tip, we're going to have to cut the tip rib out about 1/4 inch for the thickness of the foam, right where the foam is on the wing skin. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to pull the wing skin up far enough to make good contact with the bottom of the spar on the skin. In other words, we've got to be able to get good contact with the skin all the way up against the spar. So we're going to have to do a little trimming on our tip rib. Ken's cutting off this excess right here. It made the center section actually come out a little bit further than what he needed to for the wings. So he's cutting it back to the center of the bolt here, the attach bolt. And to cut this glass or the wing skins, anything, we use it's about a 1/16 thick. It's an abrasive disc cutter and a little air tool. Turns about 20,000 RPM. And it'll eat that stuff right up. Go ahead. you're cutting this, one thing you gotta be careful about, when you go across where the wing attach fittings are underneath, you gotta really ease up. You don't wanna be cutting through your attach fittings or make a mark in them. So you gotta be real careful when you cut across where your attach fittings are. Okay, now we're fixing to start applying the wing skin itself to the spars. We've already got it fitted. We're on the other side. We're doing the right wing right now. And we've got the wing skin here, and it's got the notches cut out. We'll show you in just a minute on where the bolts go. You want to cut out the notches around in your skin for the bolts fairly early, because if you don't, once you get it glued on there and the wing's all built, you have no way to get back in there to get those bolts out. And it's easier to cut out ahead of time. Okay, the skin is fitted now to the spars. Also, we've got the end rib on this side. Remember, we've already got it leveled up. It's been fluxed onto the end of the main spar. We're going to put a little flux on the end of the rear spar here. And we're going to pound a little nail in the end of it to pull it up tight while that dries. The rib here has been cut down 1/4 of an inch on top and bottom on either side of the spar. That's to make allowance for the 1/4 inch thick foam skin. Once this has been cut down 1/4 of an inch, we'll take a wire brush and you can eat that foam out about 1/8 of an inch down in there. That'll allow you to put flocks down inside that groove. Okay, have you done the bottom yet?
Yes. I've got a little
Okay.
bit.
Also, as we're putting this together, we want to paint the bottom of the spar. Now this is raw wood. There's no varnish on the same as on the top. This is still raw wood. Okay, before we put the before we put the skin on there, we want to paint just raw resin. That resin will soak up into the wood and it'll bond real well to the flux that we're going to put on the skin. Okay. Oh yeah, it's got catalyst mixed with it. Sure. Okay, let's bring the skin over again and put a little flux with it. Got a little cotton flux mixed up with vinyl ester resin here. And I might bring in one helper, anybody's. Okay, now I'm putting this flux, and I don't want it real thick, but I want to leave enough for it to just kind of squish out. Hold that up a little bit. Maybe you can see it a little bit. I'm just smearing it on here, and they're taking the squeegees and breaking it in there. Take the wing out of the way, and I'll put a little bit of flux on the bottom of the rib. Okay, now I'm just going to put a little bit of flux up underneath this. Break it into that little groove there. little bit of flux back into this joint here, where on the end of the spar itself. You get me a nail. Okay, pull that one out. When that's all dry, you can come back and pull that nail out if you want to. Doesn't really matter, you're not adding any weight with one nail. Okay, I think we're there. Okay, let's go ahead and put the skin up there with the Campbell clamps. Bryce. Okay, you're gonna line it up there. Okay, go back. There you go, right about. Hey, if you go back, I think it should be good. Right about there. Okay, Steve, you want to kind of come down here just a minute. There's a gap here because they're open up. Okay, let me get the Campbell clamps. All right, now we've got these boards, and we've got one on the rear spar and a little bit wider one on the front spar. This is to pad the Campbell clamps. Okay, can somebody hold that there? I'll come around here. Who's got a pocket knife handy? Let's move that further to the outside. I'm sorry, go to the inside, that's too long. Let's go right about here. Okay, next one. And see what we've got here, we've got the rears already taped together at the back edge. Once you get the first one or two of these on, it gets a lot easier. You don't need so many hands. You wonder why it looks like we're kind of hurrying, because we've got fine list of resin. It sets up fairly quickly. We want to give ourselves plenty of room, plenty of time to get finger fillets in here. Okay, on the rear spar, you may find that it's a little bit loose, so you can push little wedges in underneath the Campbell clamp, and that'll apply more pressure, especially if you get a little more here. On the front one, I can just pull a little more tape around it. These are about 3/4 inch square pieces of wood. You only need about 4 of them. Remember, underneath here we've got pads. These are pieces of wood running right under the spar. Otherwise, you have little creases every place you had a Campbell clamp. So you have to pad that spar with that piece of wood running the full span. Okay, now you want to come back with some blocks, and I'm just going to put them all on my finger. I'm going to run all down this joint where it's squishing out of the side here. and make a nice smooth little, what we call a finger fillet in there. The vinyl ester resin, if you're using vinyl ester resin, which is what we recommend, is non-allergenic. So you don't have any problem with skin allergies with the vinyl ester resin. We really do not recommend any safety epoxy. Some of the guys have built, one guy built a set of wings with safety epoxy, and his kid's bicycle fell over on it, and it split a little bit at the trailing edge. So we thought he'd split it apart a little bit more with a screwdriver, pocket knife, to work a little of the flux back in there, and the split just kept going. Pretty soon he had both skins completely off of the wing again. The safety epoxy does not bond to this vinyl ester resin. I'm going to take a little tape and wrap it around this leading edge here to hold it up tight against this rib. This tape I'm using is filament tape, just cheap stuff you buy at nearly anywhere, but it's got the fibers in it so you can pull tight. These are for packaging. At this point, it'd be a good time to do a check. You want to make sure that everything's going to line up good here. Make sure your wing's not too far forward or aft. There's a little bit of a gap here because we're lining it up just right with the airplane. One measurement we did make, I'm going to go back there, Ken, and we'll show this. If you notice on the bottom skin, there's a little lip right here. It's where the top skin's going to come down and overlap onto it. Well, it stops right here at this point. Well, that was a piece of metal that's put on the mold to make that shape right there, and they're both exactly the same length. So that's really a real good reference point. So pick a spot on the tail that you can measure both sides and make sure that you come out. This one comes out 160.5 inches. Now on a KR2, it's going to be different because your center section, it's going to be further on out here, and I don't have that in my mind what that dimension is, but make sure they're both they're the same on both sides. So we would go over here and measure the other side. It's 160.5 inches also. Remember that number right there is only on this airplane. Yeah, we pre-checked it when we were doing our fit up to make sure it was still good. Okay, let's go ahead and, where's our bucket of blocks? Let's put a little bit more, you need a little bit more along the leading edge, down on the forward side of the spar. You'll take that. Also, you can run your finger along there, any excess that's out on the wing skin itself in here, you want to get that out. You want this to look nice and clean in there if you can, even though nobody will ever see it. It's a good peace of mind to know that there's no excess weight in there. Okay, now at this trailing edge right here, you want this rib to be stuck at the trailing edge real well. I'm just going to take a couple of little thin pieces of plywood, one on top and bottom, and I'll just take a little C-clamp and put on there to hold that together. You don't have to really clamp it tight. You don't want to crush the foam core, but it just wants to be snugged up so that it is up against there. Anybody have any questions? Any of you guys watching? Or anything that you might add?
If I were to take that front, put there by the,
Yeah, that's a good idea. A lot of tape and pull that up. Steve, would you like to jump in there on that? This guy here is Steve Alderman. He's from up in Colorado. He's got a KR2 with a 2100 Redmaster turbo in it. He flew down a couple days ago to help us out with this project. Somebody's got the phone going, gosh, I'd like to talk to that guy.
up at it to show this thing.
But under they fit it, we didn't find anything.
That's what's happening here. We're filling this full of blocks here, this gap, which is okay.
I'll make sure it's filled.
Yeah, but you want to look right. Looks good to me. Okay, some of you have probably already spotted, are you filming this? The rear spar. You're going to say, oh, he's got that in there backwards. You're right, he does. But that was one of those things that you just kind of do now and then. You make a mistake. It's okay. In this case, it actually fit a little better because he had to put a little bit of a doubler on the forward side here. He's got an extra 1/8 of an inch of plywood right here to make his spacing come out right on his wing attach fittings. And it just seemed to fit a little better by turning it over. Structurally, it doesn't matter at all. So you can put that on the web on the front or the back. Normally, you put the web on the forward side. It makes it easier to build a fuel tank and stuff like that in the back later. Okay, one thing I wanted to point out, I should have kind of mentioned it earlier. I've had several phone calls on how to cut out the ply foam ribs. Well, they're marked out here, and we've actually fitted the other side. We've come back and used them as templates to show where to mark the other ribs. So all you do is just take a saber saw. This is kind of a medium tooth blade. If you get a real fine tooth blade, it tends to gum it up real quick. And obviously a real coarse one would tend to try to delaminate the stuff. So just kind of a medium tooth blade. We'll cut the rest of these. If you have a bandsaw, of course, that works a lot easier. So we'll go ahead and use a bandsaw on the rest of these. On the great big sheet, it's hard to get in a bandsaw. A lot of times you start out, cut the thing in two with a saber saw, and then get them in small enough pieces where you can use your bandsaw. Now this wing skin, we're back to the left wing now. The skin is all glued on, and we're starting to fit all of the other ribs in here. Okay, we haven't glued any of them in there yet. They've all been cut. Now remember, you got to cut like 1/4 of an inch down into here to make allowance for your foam. But up at the front side, it'll stay long because there's no foam in that forward edge. To position these, measure, before you ever cut the rib down, measure the full length of the rib from the cord length. And then you can take your tape measure and run along on this taper until you find where the front of the rib would be at the front of the wing and the trailing edge obviously at the rear. Okay, then you can make your mark, and in this case he's got a mark right here where that goes. Now the reason this looks a little funny, I might point out, he's got varnish painted up here. He's left a fairly wide area to bond this to bare wood. Okay, if you had the whole spar varnished already, when you find out where that rib goes, you'd want to really sand that good down to bare wood so that the vinyl ester would stick real well. The top of it, you notice he's already cut down 1/4 of an inch also to make allowance for the top skin as it comes on there. Moving on to here, this is a bow eye I was talking about earlier. You can buy these for about $3 a piece down at Walmart store. This is a 3/8 piece of all thread screwed in there. You can grind off these two sharp points because they'll cut into the wing. But really all you got to do now is drill a hole up from below through the skin and through the spar and put a big washer and a nut on the inside right in here, and that gives you a place to tie into. Some of the guys have made welded a larger washer to the nut and put a couple of little screws in it in the spar so that they could unscrew this and take that off, like for painting and whatever. Moving on out here, the little stub spar, cut it to fit. It's just going to butt right into the end of the rib here, and then the tip rib has been cut down 1/4 of an inch. Some of you guys that have bought wing skins up before this tape was made, you found that this rib was an inch too long. Well, all you got to do is just keep cutting it down until it fits in there. I didn't discover it until we started making this one. It'll just go right on the end of the stub spar. The thing I want to point out before you start gluing these nose ribs on, as well as the trailing edge, is eyeball, get right down here in line and make sure that this leading edge is straight all the way down to the tip. They have a tendency when you clamp them up there to try to kind of sag down in the middle. But you'll notice it's still fairly flexible here. So we want to pull that up and make it straight. The way we do it, the easiest way anyway, is to get someone to help you pull it up where it needs to be, and then just put a clamp. I'm just taking this board down to the ground, and that'll hold a little up pressure on it. Obviously, if somebody's moving the airplane around, it's going to be, you know, this whole thing will be moving, so you have to have everybody keep still. If I eyeball right down in front of this, now I find that's nice and straight there, all right down this leading edge. Now we're ready to go ahead and glue those ribs in. We'll just use a little flux with our vinyl ester resin. Obviously, we've got to, before we do that, we've got to take our wire brush and eat a little foam out, and then the pieces fit right in. Also, on the trailing edge, you'll want to look right straight down that also, and make sure it's not bowed down when you glue that. Sometimes you'll have to take a little piece of angle aluminum or something and jack that up to make it all straight. Okay, we've got this. All the ribs now are glued in the left wing, and we've already got all the wires fitted in. We've got the wingtip light wires here, and we've got the antenna wire coming in here for his VOR antenna. He's got it mounted here and drilled through the spar, so the little wire, the antenna, it's a V-shaped affair, goes out through in the center section of the wing. He's got his bracket made right here where he can put his FIDO and his static lines on there. There's two little lines and fittings, and those poke through the bottom of the skin. And he's got little pieces of plastic rubber hose going through the ribs so that the wires will go through there. Right in here he's got his the nut fluxed on, the wing tie down here so it won't come loose. And out here at the tip he's got his a nut tied in the wire so that it can't be pulled back through the rib. Okay, the guys right now are putting the flocks on. You want to put it on all of the ribs, you want to put it on the spars, and you want to put it on the trailing edge. Right along this top edge here, there's a little piece of foam on the inside of the wing that we glue on there for you. And that's so it'll give you a place to pile that flocks on top. Don't worry about getting a little bit much. If you need to kind of pile it up on top a little bit, it's okay, because it's going to squish out. It helps to have several people around when you start to do this operation right here. Yeah, like right along here, his spar sits a little bit low. Well, it's real easy just to pile that flux up pretty good. And it'll fill that gap. We've picked the tail up and we've checked this cord line here on this rib to make sure it's level. And we want to make sure that in this position with the tail where it is, when we go to build the other wing, that it's also level. That's kind of our last check before we seal it up to make sure that our wings are twisted the same, or they have the same amount of washout. Oh yeah, we're not putting any flocks down this leading edge joint. What happens if you try to do it all at once, you end up running out of time. And it's a lot easier to go ahead and glue it on the spars and the ribs, and get the trailing edge all clamped out, get the camel clamps on, and don't do this leading edge right now. Wait. After it's all cured out, it's real easy. You can kind of pick that leading edge up a little bit, and you can work the little flocks up under, and you can take masking tape and come along later and clamp it together. But then, oh, we've also got the ribs all drilled here now, so that they'll breathe out towards the center. Remember, we drilled the spar. Well, you also want your wing to be able to breathe. This particular airplane, he's got a 19-gallon fuel tank up in the nose, and that's really about all the guy really needs. So we're not putting any wing tanks in this one. Right now, looks like they're doing pretty good.
Here, right now, Steve. That might go a little heavy. Look, I want back here. Back here, look, all right.
Yeah, really, you can kind of smooth that down a little bit there.
Way too much.
Yeah, that's really quite a bit.
Too much?
Yeah, it's kind
Oh,
of
so spread it out
right
this
here
way.
looks pretty good, 'cause it's gonna,
Yeah, I'm going to put it out that way.
it'll come
I wouldn't
completely
spread it that
together, and you'll have some ooze out the back that of course will just be gone. And what comes forward will be, you know, up in the wing. Everything ready?
Everything's ready, I believe.
Okay.
Wherever it takes you.
The thing that you want to really watch out for when you put this on is that you get this leading edge where it needs to be. I know we're not going to glue it right now. Line it up down there at that end, Steve, and make sure that your leading edge, otherwise if it's too far forward or backward, you'll really have a problem later trying to, you know, what do you do with that? So
Okay.
line it up right along here first, and then you can push it down.
You want to push it before you clamp it, or?
Well, I've got some masking tape. I think I'm just going to put
Here's
it.
some right behind you, this, the other side.
Well, this will work, just to hold it for now. All I want to do is keep it from sliding.
Push it down to the position. Look at you, you got it.
Okay, now we're putting a little, I call them pads, for lack of knowing what else to call them, but they go on top of the two spars, just like we did on the bottom. They're clamping the trailing edge with a couple of pieces of, it's 1x1 angle aluminum.
You want to clamp the trailing edge first?
And yeah, you'll need to clamp it.
Got to go around and get a shot of that.
Yeah, can you? Okay, I tell you what, guys, on this, there's a real problem. If you have that too far forward, it makes your trailing edge really cave in. You only want to clamp about 1/4 of an inch of the trailing edge. So let your angles will actually come together in the back.
You want to take that?
It won't stick to it, not
You
aluminum.
want to come up about where the foam is with the leading
No,
edge?
only about 1/4 of an inch of the trailing edge. So really scoot it on back where you just barely catch it.
These work better.
That'll give you a nice sharp edge.
Need is a little, need is a little,
We may want to put a little, yeah, get some of that excess out there. We may want to put a little clamp right down here at the bottom.
You don't want to just squish this tip flat. You want to keep some thickness to it, otherwise it'll break off if someone runs into it. But it doesn't hurt to go ahead and put a little clamp on here. And you at least want to pull the edges together. You see, I'm just barely clamping the edge. I'm not putting the clamp up in the middle of it.
yes, and I mentioned too, I guess the aluminum doesn't really bond too well to that. So that
Yeah,
takes off.
right. The aluminum really doesn't bond too well. If you're worried about it, you can get you some car wax and wax it a little bit first. But really, once it's all cured out, you'll be able to take a hammer and just hit it, and they'll peel right off of there.
Are we ready to?
Okay, camel clamps are going on, right? Here.
Cut this and bigger.
Yeah, we need to cut this and spread that open a little more.
Can you put the shim underneath this end?
No, it's tension on the aluminum.
Pinch it on the aluminum. Right here? Push that in.
They had a little bit too tight, guys.
So tight.
Yeah, relax it. See, okay, it's all right. Just leave it right there. What you can do now is put a little block underneath here to get the distance that you need. Yeah, feels pretty good, right? Give a little about an 1/8 inch, it'd be great.
Pull it down here.
Okay, Dad, we need to get some weights that we can put on here to hold this down in the middle. That's what
You know, they're up at the end here. You got one here, Chris? Yes. Just a little bit of oil. Not really pressure.
What?
You have to hold it over. You ever try and make it longer? This one's sort of steady. Yeah, it's not too steady.
It's a little cool. We'll turn the heat up here just a second. And move it, go ahead and go.
We could go through the other one.
Okay. Now, we're not putting a whole lot of pressure on it here. All we're trying to do is just kind of squeeze it down together on that stub spar out there. And we're going to come back here now. We've kind of relaxed now. We'll come back and clean up some of the excess where it's oozing out. Also, can you get this down in here? Put a couple of steel weights up on here. All I'm doing is holding this wing section down right in here so that it lines up with the center section. In fact, we need a little bit more weight right here to hold this right on this corner. Let's come up with another weight there. I want to mention one other thing before we close up this wing. Those of you that are building in gas tanks in the wing, if you use this entire section here, you're going to have 15 gallons. Now, that's quite a bit of fuel for a KR2. I recommend only to come back about 8 or 10 inches. That'll give you, around 8 or 10 gallons. And put another piece, either of this ply foam or use the same urethane that you're building the center section out of. You come right straight across here with another piece of foam. Run it down to the bottom and up into these sides, flush with the top here. And then put 2 layers of glass all inside this area here. And you're asking me what to do about this deal, these nuts. It's hard to lay glass over them. So take a piece of this foam, the urethane foam, and just put you a block that'll come out to about right here. And that'll cover this whole section. You can drill or poke little holes in it, make it fit over this and glue it on. So actually your glass will come down the rear side of the spar and then up and around this piece of foam. And then to put your fittings in there, come near the center or the rear of the tank. I usually take a little piece of aluminum, about 2 inches square, drill my holes in it, one for not a vent, but a drain, and then the other one for the fuel outlet. And I'll just glue it right inside here, and then I'll cut this out so I can set it in there. And then the fuel lines go to the inside. Now when you put before you put the top of the tank on, you need to figure out, just do a little bit of measuring here, figure out where that tank area is going to be. And put another layer of glass on the top of the inside of the wing skin. We have these little fuel caps that we sell. They're $8, and they work real well. They're made for marine application. This is a little metal piece here. You can do some grinding with a grinder on the outside of this piece, and that will allow the flux to stick. And this is a little gasket. I usually just cut that tab off. But the trick when you're putting this in the cap is you always want these little handles on top to be in a straight line with the airflow. So tighten it up good, and then when you glue it in the top of the skin here, then these are lined up. And then always when you tighten it up, it'll always come back to the same place. Okay, one of the things, you're going to need a fuel tank vent in a fuel tank. So the way I normally do that is to take a piece of either a 1/4 inch aluminum, works really great, or some type of flexible. I prefer a solid line, like a metal line, and it'll come right in the top here and bend out here just a little bit, and it'll come right in this top front forward corner. And then I like to run that along the top of the spar out at least another 2 feet before I bend and go down through the bottom. That makes this point here higher than your tank here. That way when you're sitting on the ground and the wind's blowing a little bit and it's shaking it and you're building up pressure, it won't tend to siphon out if this point is higher than this point right here. So come out here a little bit and then out through the bottom, and you can bend that forward. One other thing we want to mention before we end the film is to make sure that you get your ailerons in there. Well, that makes sense before you fly it. But you want to have the skin completely all glued together. In other words, the wing is all built. Now, this just kind of goes back to the way the KR plans tell you to do it. You build the whole wing, and then you come back and cut the aileron out of it. Well, we do it the same way. Go ahead and measure out your aileron and cut it out just like the KR plans tell you to do. And in our little instruction manual, we show you how to cut the spars for it. You use the standard spars just like in the KR plans, and the hinge, and all of the attachment for your bell crank is all done just like the standard KR wing is done. It doesn't hurt to take some of your scrap ply foams on the end of your aileron down here and make little end plates for the ailerons. And you'll have plenty of that little scrap left over. And once you get it all cut out, you can mount the bob weight here, the counterweight for the aileron, and you can cut it to fit all up underneath inside there. On the leading edge, I wanted to point out here, obviously we've got the wing is all glued together, and we've not yet glued this leading edge. When all of these clamps, when we can take all these clamps off, we may need to come back and trim just a little bit off of this leading edge here, so that it will match up with the bottom, or with the bottom skin, and set back on that little. There's a little jogger there. It's really easy now, once you've done that, to work a little bit of flocks up underneath there, and then go ahead and tape it. The reason we didn't do it now is there's just too many other things going on. It's easier to let everything else get hard, then come back and do this. One thing we did do that I didn't point out earlier, there's a little flange underneath there where the top skin's going to overlap. We took some 36 grit sandpaper and sanded that, because it's got a glossy, slick surface. Now this, I'm talking about the piece on the bottom skin here. If you sand that, it'll help that flock stick. Now once this is all taped down and it's all glued real well across there and it's all dry, then you can come back and sand. You want to sand back to about where the foam is. And on the top and the bottom with some 36 or at least 80 grit to make it kind of, instead of a clear look, it'll look kind of a whitish opaque where you sanded it. Then you'll put 2 strips of fiberglass cloth over that. Now, don't bring this cloth way back up on here, because it's just more for you to have to fill up later and make it smoother. But just come back, about a 2-inch wide strip right over that joint on the leading edge. It'll make a real durable leading edge. And you really only need about 1 layer over that. But if you don't use 2 layers, you're going to do some sanding on there, and it'll, when you sand it off, it'll be, you'll be sanding through it. So you want to make sure that you have 2 layers on there. I'm out here. A question just came up a minute ago. How far around do you bring that cloth? Well, I like to bring it clear on around this tip and up to about where the curve stops and it starts going straight back. You can get the cloth to bend around that. You may need to do a little bit of body work in here with a little pink body putty in some of these little areas here, maybe a little bit along that leading edge, and sand that in before you put the cloth on, and that will help smooth that cloth around there. If you go back past this point on back, you can't get the cloth to bend around. It's just too sharp of a corner. So just kind of sand and dress and work that in there. You should have plenty of flocks in there, so you've got a good solid joint there anyway. I ought to mention, before you get ready to paint this skin, you'll want to sand the whole skin with about 100 grit, 100 to 120 grit. And you only want to sand it lightly just to knock some of the gloss off. You don't want to sand down through the glass, obviously. But if you take the shininess off, it'll help you paint it here a lot better. You should be able to paint it with a coat of lacquer primer. I like to use that black lacquer primer that helps shield against the ultraviolet. And then wet sand it with 400 and then put any kind of paint on it you want. I normally use Emerald.